let's talk a little bit about rebuy strategy. The bigger your stack, the more maneuverability you have, and the bigger edge a good player has. This goes without saying. I think we can all agree on that. Now, the consequence of this in-game is that we buy in for the maximum amount. We rebuy to the maximum amount, and we add on the maximum amount. Now, there are cases where we wouldn't do that. Ideally, we would note the effective stack sizes and we would adjust to that. So, say we have 20,000 chips and everybody on the table has 5,000. Adding on chips in that scenario really doesn't give us that much of an extra edge. However, if we have 3,000 chips and everybody else at the table has 10,000 chips, adding on another 2,000 chips means that we are back to average stack size once we double up. Just once with the add-on. So adding on in that situation is of paramount importance. On the slide I've listed some of the concepts that I think are the most important if you want to master the 180-man sit-and-goes. The first of them being the stack to pot ratios. Now, if you have 80% of your stack in the pot already, not your own chips but other people's chips, then you have to understand that there's a massive incentive for you to gamble. If you have 50%, you have to understand that there's still a massive incentive for you to gamble because it's chip equity mode. A favorable stack to pot ratio makes it possible for you to take some gambles that you would have otherwise had to pass up on. So you need to be always aware of how much money there's actually in the pot already, because that greatly alters the optimal choice for you, the optimal strategy for you, if you will. The second important concept is inflection points. The second really important concept to master is inflection points. Nobody really cares if you have 2.5 big blinds and you shove from the button. They're never gonna fold, so you have 0 fold equity in that scenario. The way you combat that strange and annoying situation where you have 2.5 big blinds and no fold equity is by understanding that there's this concept of inflection points that need to dictate a majority of your play as a short stack. An inflection point is essentially a point where you lose your fold equity if you fail to act. Say you have 4 big blinds and you are on the cutoff and it's folded around to you and you fail to make a shove. It doesn't matter what your hand is. Let's just say you cannot make the shove. Well, let's assume that for every other hand until you're under the gun, somebody acts before you and you pick up garbage, so you haven't been able to make a shove there either. Then, if the blinds pass through you, you don't have 4 big blinds anymore, you have 2.5. There you go, 0 fold equity. What are you gonna do? A lot of guys that I have coaching sessions with go like, well, I only have 2.5 big blinds now, so I might as well just wait a little bit. You're looking at it the wrong way. What you need to be looking at was that one time where you had the 4 big blind stack on the cutoff with a little bit of fold equity, and you might have considered a hand like Jack 5 suited to be too bad for you. Well, you know what? I don't think it was. Because what happens in this game, because it's chip equity mode, is that everybody's trying to get active and chip up a little bit. If you fail to do that, you'll quickly find yourself in that sort of awkward stage where you have no fold equity and you know it's all a question of time before you're done for. Mind the inflection points. It's really important to understand that concept. Another important concept is, of course, chip EV and ICM. These are baseline concepts for all kinds of sit-and-goes. So if you don't understand this already, I suggest you go ahead and look up some older videos here on CardRunners. There's been made a ton of really good videos on both sit-and-go wizard and on multi-table tournaments and cash games where you can kind of get an idea about chip EV. ICM is probably best understood if you examine some of this sit-and-go material. Another thing you need to be good at is on-the-fly effective big blind calculation. If the ante's in play, you need to factor that in when you make your big blind calculation. So you may not have 10 big blinds, maybe you really have 8.5. You may not have 8 big blinds. Because of the ante, you may have 6.5. There's all sorts of scenarios where your effective stack size, or not your effective stack size, but your stack size is changed dramatically by the effective big blind being different than it seems.